I'd like to call to order the Oconee County Planning Commission. It is Monday, November the 1st, 2021. Gary, would you lead us in the invocation, please?
Glad to. Thank you, Holy Father, for the beauty of Oconee County and for the many activities we enjoy in the upstate of South Carolina. May we work to preserve and protect this land for generations to come. We ask that your Spirit be present among us and help us to work with cooperation and respect for differing opinions. We ask for your guidance as we plan for the future of the county in a positive and constructive manner. Please bless all those who work for the betterment of the county and keep them in your peace, prosperity, and good health. Amen.
Let's see the Pledge of Allegiance. Let me go ahead and lead that. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's get down to the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Make a motion, we approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, hold up a hand. It passes. All right, public comment on non-agenda items. I have one comment. Can you bring up that address that's up? Just a minute. What I wanted to do was, last time I showed you a map that the GIS lady had put together of the addresses that have been listed in the first 3 quarters. Thank you. Thank you very much. But if you really look closely at it, and she'll bring it up here in a minute, they've got different colors on there. There were 876 addresses assigned. Of those, 17 were agriculture, 26 commercial, 2 educational, 4 industrial. The residential were 810, and the utility 7. Just for your interest to see what the breakdown was. That's a lot of addresses in a 3-month period with the kind of activity that we've had with COVID and whatever.
10 months.
Yes.
10 months.
Oh, 10 months, I'm sorry. I also wanted to bring to your attention, the county is a member of the Lake Keowee Source Water Protection Team, and they have got some funds together to try to repair septic tanks, to find and fix the problem and grant money. They actually have a phone number and a website that you can go to, but the county is a member of that Lake Keowee Source Water Protection Team. Does anybody else have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question on the addresses added
Yes.
for the last 10 months. How does that compare to, say, 2020?
We had that, and I didn't bring it up. I tell you what, why don't I try to put it together or find it, because the
It's a
GIS lady.
curiosity question. I was just curious if the growth this year is paralleled the growth in previous years, or if we're accelerating.
Well, it's a good question, and I tell you what, let's see if we can't dig it out for the next time, okay? I think it's well worthwhile knowing. It's just got interesting to me. Here we are in the middle of COVID and supposedly an economic turn down and whatever, that all of this has occurred. Anybody else got any comments?
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, I don't know if I got messed up, but I was thinking number 5, public comment. Were there no persons that signed up, or was it, or did we skip it? I'm a little confused, sorry.
Nobody signed up.
Okay. Thank you.
Staff comments, you got anything, Vivian?
No, sir.
All right. Let's get down to development standards. Let me give everybody a quick review of where we are and what we're trying to do, just so that we can refresh our memory. The plan is still to return to the county council the original development standards with a summary letter, and attached to that letter is going to be version B, which is a result of the public hearing on November the 15th, and of course, our efforts in between the last two meetings. Hopefully, we'll complete version B tonight, and we'll present it as our consideration for the public to comment on at the hearing on November the 15th. Tonight, what I want to do is take each section like we did last time, see if there's anything we want to revise or make additions or deletions to, and then vote on that section rather than wait until the last. Vivian, you got a big job keeping up with the revisions and whatever. Let us know if you're getting behind, okay?
Yeah, just, I'm trying to split the screen so you can see it all.
All right, I know you are. During this discussion, I'll relax the comment requirements and allow public comments before each section with a 4-minute time limit. So Tom, if you want to comment about section whatever, and then wait and pause, I'll let you get to the lighting section or the buffering section, whatever you want to.
Well,
Okay.
I signed up for just comments in general. I have some general comments for the overall.
Well, I want to be sure that whatever you have to say is fresh in our minds. And so I'll let you divide it out, or if you want to do it all at once, whatever you want to do, okay? Hang on just a minute, I haven't finished. No, I have finished. So go ahead, Tom. Come on up with your comments.
For the record, I am Tom Markovich, and I represent myself. And I don't know who else, but anyway. I find it interesting, number one, that, and I don't know how this went to the county council in the very beginning, but what came back was, from the council, what was sent back to planning commission was actually a chapter 32 ordinance language, not chapter 38. Now, how it got changed to 38, I got no idea. It really doesn't matter. Because in my estimation and in reading what's in this, it's really more of a design, it's really more of a zoning ordinance anyway, because it's about use. Now, that being said, I think, one, I'm unquestionably against this. There was a lot of time spent over many years trying to put together a zoning ordinance for this county, and one that would work considering how rural it is and all the different factors that play into it. And it took a long time, but in the long run, it got worked out. In my estimation, there's things that are built into this document that, one, cross the line. I don't believe that it keeps the use matrix for the zoning districts uniform. And the state law says they must be uniform, period. You can have different regulations for different uses in the various things, but they have to be uniform. This is pulling sections out of one and to another, and I mean, it's just, saying, well, we're not gonna let this use conflict with this other use, and I mean, it's so far away from zoning and the public aspect of zoning. I mean, we tend to, I remember when this thing first came up, it was described as the good neighbor ordinance. And I kind of questioned that, because really and truly zoning is about the public. It's not about neighbors and how they may be conflicting with each other. We already have laws in place that allow for people to make sure that when they buy a piece of property, they're being protected, whether it's through deed restrictions or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of mechanisms out there. We already have, again, we have zoning. There's no question about the zoning in this. And yet, this begins to create conflicts between what's already been passed and what will come into this. One, by definition, what's already in the Oconee County ordinance, this would in fact amount to spot zoning. Because you're taking properties that are in conflict and you're saying, no, we're going to rezone this, rezone. And so that, there's this other requirement that applies. Two, in preparing for this, I looked up some things that the Attorney General had to say. And it involved a slightly different mechanism in zoning, but nonetheless, his response was that he thought, until the state came up with a very specific type of legislation, that something similar to this would be considered taxation. And that he said that he believed that the courts would see it as being a tax. Because we're going to take particular uses and we're going to say, okay, if you're going to go into this situation, you're going to spend X number of dollars to not only do this to begin with, but then you got to maintain it. And I just don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair. We already have other language that's already in the zoning ordinance that makes it perfectly clear on control-free of what's expected, what the setbacks are, and when they apply, and all that sort of thing. So these are all issues that have to be taken into consideration in my view, and I don't think they have been. Lighting. We already have a lighting ordinance. It's all part of Appendix A. Now we're going to probably have a conflict between this lighting ordinance and the lighting ordinance that's in Appendix A. Then, buffers. This definition in here is totally different than the definition that's already in the zoning. We have a definition for a buffer in the zoning ordinance, totally different. I mean, we're creating conflict here. And I just think that this does not serve the purpose of protecting the public. This serves the purpose of trying to protect specific pieces of property, not the public. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's take a look. You've got on the right screen and the left screen. The right screen is the one that has been revised from the previous meeting. And the first paragraph, the purpose of these standards, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody have anything additional they want to add?
Sir,
Yes.
did you not have an email that you wanted to read from?
Well, I was going to wait until we get to lighting, and then I was going to read
Okay.
what she had to say. I was going to take it a section at a time.
Okay.
New development, Mr. Chairman, means these, if enacted, would just be 2 new property transfers, developments from this point on.
That's
So
what
nobody would be subject to it that already have existing.
No.
Okay.
And that's why the word new was put in there, and it's in green.
Yes, sir.
It's on the right screen. Everybody comfortable with that first paragraph then? The applicability hasn't changed. And the second sentence there, or second paragraph, the buffer and the screening requirements may be waived or modified between adjacent properties through a written recorded document. I went to David and I asked him if he would comment on that. And what you see in yellow on the right side is what he added on there. And it really is a very good enhancement, because the question had come up before in our discussion at the last meeting. What happens if the property changes hands? How do they know about what has occurred? And when that does happen, in the title search, it would come up because it would be in the Register of Deeds documents. So I think that answers the question. And Vivian, a copy must be filed with you, the planning department, or whoever's heading the planning department. Is that okay? Comfortable with that?
Yes, because it would just become part of their permit.
Okay, all right. Has anybody got any comments about that addition there that's in yellow? I'm going to assume that everybody is comfortable with that.
I've got a question. Vivian, I was wondering, when you say this becomes part of their permit, is that a given and we don't need to make mention of it in here? Or is that something that should be included in this?
Anything that's filed with our planning department is basically uploaded into CitizenServe. So we don't actually keep a paper stuff anymore. We keep everything in Citizen Serve.
So you're saying yes or no? I can't tell for sure.
Restate the question?
Okay, when you say this will become part of their permit,
Yeah.
do we need to make mention of that in this document, or should we not worry about saying something because it'll be taken care of?
This says must be filed with the Cumberland County Planning Department. I need to think about that one.
Fair enough.
Anything filed with our department is usually filed or applied. It must be applied with the Oconee County Planning Department, something like that. Is that what you mean? Changing the words?
Do you
Well, I
want
wasn't meaning anything. I was just asking a question.
Okay.
Do we need to address that in this document? Or is it a given and it will be taken care of? In other words, whoever reads this, do they know that it becomes part of their permit? That it's communicated?
We may have to speak with the attorney on that and reword it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, definitions.
Wait a minute.
Oop.
Sorry, Mike. But, so this is something that never can be changed? If you and the previous homeowner have an agreement of whatever, and I buy the land, I have to abide by that agreement, or do I get to change it, or do I get to make my own agreement with the landowner, or what?
You're now the new owner.
Tell me.
And first of all, you'll find out that the agreement has been recorded. And you are now the new owner, so you may have to, if the other person doesn't agree, you may have to put up a buffer, not the other person, because you're the new owner. But if the buffer's already there and it's on the other side or the other owner or whatever, then nothing has to be done. And you want the buffer.
Something don't sound right about that.
So if you're saying if you move in as a new person, the buffer's already there, and you and your neighbor say, hey, we don't want this buffer anymore, you just write up a new agreement, record it with the deeds office.
And take the buffer down.
So it can be changed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah. Okay, can we go on to the definitions? If you'll scroll up a little bit on the right-hand side. I had a question about this. I had a little bit of a problem understanding something. And the objectionable light source, or direct glare source, David, help me out with this. When you get down into the phraseology there, I'm on the second line. Emanating from light fixtures in the field of view where lens, lamp, or reflector is offensively visible above a height of 5 feet. Help me out with that. Does everybody understand what that means? Because I'm having a little trouble with it.
The way I understand it means if the glare is coming up above a 5-foot level, then it's objectable. You can't have it if it's hitting something on the so-called buffer, like the pavement or whatever, and glaring back up over 5 feet, then you can't have that type of lighting. You have to change it.
So the frustrating thing about this statement,
Is the word?
we tried to improve over the previous statement,
Yeah,
but it's still, you have to define what offensively is. So that's still subjective unless you go out and measure decibel, or not decibel, lumens, that kind of stuff, and direction. You really can't well define offensively unless it's a matter of the offended telling you it's offensive.
I'd like to make a comment about that.
go ahead.
I was thinking that this is the first time this has really come up because David just offered it last time we met. And based on what I've read, I don't think we should include it. I don't think we should include it because it actually brings more problems up to interpret than it does if you don't have it in there. So that's the way I feel about it.
Anybody else down here on the right? Pat? Alex?
Yeah, I don't know if it adds anything productive that was already there. I mean, it does to some degree, but I think it's, I think still the gist of it is if the light is shining directly on the property to where it's blinding, that's the problem. I don't know that it adds much to the ordinance.
Yeah, go ahead.
To me, that's not a definition. This is definitions, that doesn't have anything to do with it, that's saying what objectable light is, and we're talking about, he's adding that to lighting, that would be something else to add into definitions. But I'm like, Gary, I mean, I don't think it's needed there.
Well, let me comment that when you get down into the lighting section, it really gets down into it. Can you scroll up a little bit, Vivian? It talks about, present a hazard to drivers or pedestrians by impairing their ability to safely traverse, and so as not to create a nuisance by projecting or reflecting light skyward onto neighboring properties, etc. All right, let's get this down. How many people think that that we should eliminate this, or what? How many people think that? How many people feel that way? 1, 2, 3. Oh, jeepers, a guy that submitted it too. Okay. Vivian, will you mark that down as we're going to take that out? Okay. Screening. I believe that's a definition that's in that comes from the county's definitions. Okay.
What about this, Tom brought up this definition of buffer. Can I speak about that?
Yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to add buffer? Because that comes out of our definitions.
Okay. I want to get some clarity in my mind because Vivian, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think you told us that this definition for buffer was already in an ordinance. And that's why I felt comfortable using it. But I'm listening to Tom, and Tom's saying it conflicts with Appendix A, definition of buffer. And if that's true, then I think we should consider using the Appendix A buffer definition and not this one.
Just give me a second, I'm looking it up. I'm sorry.
Take your time.
It's actually not, there's two definitions for a buffer in the main.
Here is Gary,
Okay, and see, there's one.
here's the definition up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Is everybody comfortable in what we've seen in that first section? If so, then I'd like to make a motion or move that we accept the first section with the one correction of removing the objectionable light or objectionable direct glare source.
Second.
I just wanted, this section right here, where it's kind of duplicated, I'm taking that out as well, correct? So I left it in.
Yes,
just
yes, yes. Yeah, so there's two things that are gonna be removed. We have a second on that. Is there any discussion? So there's two sections that are gonna be removed from that. All those in favor, raise one hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 of us. Opposed? 1. All right, lighting. I have an email from Debbie Sewell, and the section is lighting. I'm going to read that to you into the record. Light standards in this ordinance address artificial light and light pollution. When followed, these standards would reduce the negative effects of lighting in new developments on existing agriculture, forest land, and residential. These standards need to be clear and concise in their ordinance. Strict guidelines are less important than guidelines that actually address lighting that affects neighboring properties. The 3 main types of light pollution are glare, light trespass, and sky glow. Glare is produced by upshielded lighting and can be hazardous on roadways and neighboring property. Light trespass occurs when unwanted light shines into or on neighboring properties or roadways. Sky glow is a combination of all the reflected light and upward directed, unshielded light escaping up and into the sky, obscuring the view of night sky. General guidelines clearly address these types of light pollution by making appropriate lighting choices, shielding lights properly, and using lighting only where needed. So those were her comments. Can you bring back the
I
screen
just
for
put
us?
that up on the screen so they could see it.
All right. Okay, let's get into lighting.
Can I, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman? Mr. Markovich has obviously done his homework. Looking at section 32 of the Code of Ordinances, I mean, that is development standards. So why are we putting additional development standards in chapter 38? Why did we decide to do that? I wasn't here when we obviously came up with this last year or so. But I'd like to understand that before we move forward on trying to modify chapter 38.
From what I understand, 32 and 38 need to really be harmonized, is the word they used. It's a problem that's been occurring and hasn't been corrected for a long time. So we continue to struggle with this. There is occasionally conflicts between the two.
But isn't this going to exacerbate those conflicts?
I don't know that. All I know is David moved this thing to 38 and thought this was the appropriate place for it. And this is something that we can ask him on November the 15th. Vivian, do you want to comment about it?
I wasn't part of it really. I mean, I remember Adam struggling with it. But I don't remember the hows or the whys.
Well, I know that he went to David about it.
Yeah.
And that David said this was a place
As in
for
Mr.
it.
Root, yes, our attorney,
Um,
for the camera purposes.
I can't fully answer your question. We can direct it to David on the 15th and see if we're doing the right thing or if we're causing a bigger problem or what. That's all
Well,
I can do at
can I
this
just
point.
maybe-
Yes, Gary?
Just, here's what's in my mind, is the county council's asked us to review this, have a public hearing, and get it back to them, and that we've decided that's, we've got to do that. But we've also decided that we could make this document better. And just as Mr. Nix mentioned, I wasn't here when this original document came through, and I definitely have had some input in ways that I think it makes it better. So I'm very much more for Plan B than I am the original. And with your summary, bringing up Plan B, I think is a very logical thing to do. I think it makes a lot of sense to say, we did what you wanted us to do, and in so doing, we've improved the document, which is Plan B. And hopefully they'll review that.
hopefully. So, yes, Frankie?
I got a question for Vivian. Do you have can you find the, development standards in chapter 32?
Right here.
So which
I mean,
part of it?
Where the,
I mean, chapter 32 has sexually oriented businesses, airport height limitations, communication towers, group residential developments, land development and subdivision regulations, tattooing facilities, sign control, and RV park standards. Those are all within the unified performance standards in chapter 32.
so why are we trying to add to that and put it in 38?
Well, this is what David had asked.
Well, I know this came up with Adam originally. He was the one that said, oh, we need these, and that's how it got started. The council didn't do this on their own and say, y'all need to work on this. But, I mean, if we've already got development standards, and I have to agree with Tom that we're taking things out of 32 and all this and putting this, if we've already got them, why do we have to redo it? I mean, there's no reason for us to redo the Statue of Liberty. We already got one. So, I mean, it seems like we're going overboard with some of this stuff.
Well, I would say that if Mr. Rudy's gonna be here on the 15th, those are all great questions for him, because I don't think any one of us can definitively say why it's in chapter 38 versus 32. It sounds like it came from direction from him, so let's just hold those questions until the next meeting, and we can certainly find out exactly why.
Okay, let's try to work through section 2, lighting. I think the addition there was down at the bottom, a light plan shall be required by the planning director or their designated representative referencing chapter 38, appendix A, such and such numbers of the Oconee County Code of Ordinances. And those lighting standards are in appendix A, and if anybody has any question about them, my comment would have been, we need to learn from the RV park ordinance by maybe putting 2 or 3 words in there that we need to have a plan to scale. When I look through appendix A, it doesn't say that it has to be in a particular scale, but it does say that it has to be done by an appropriately licensed design professional in the state of South Carolina. But I think we ought to just add 2 or 3 words in there after appendix A and just put a dash, to scale. Does anybody have any comments about that, or am I going overboard, or what?
Mike?
Yeah, Frankie?
Is it not understood that if you have to have a licensed person to do it, they're gonna automatically do it to scale?
Yeah, you would think that, but I'm wondering, what the heck is an appropriately licensed design professional? But you would hope that they would put it to scale.
And I got one other question. This appendix A, is it throughout the county now, or is it just for the Fair Play overlay?
It is just the Fair Play I-85 overlay.
So we're taking something that the Fair Play people came up with and applying it to the entire county now.
Just to the areas that are affected by this.
Well, this is anywhere in the county. If a business builds in a residential type area, he has to abide by this and has to abide by the Fair Play overlay appendix A. Is that not something that sound fishy about that?
We were trying to get, the concept was, if we come up with standards and we got one set of standards and then we have another set of lighting standards, why not use the ones that are already available?
Well, can I ask a
Yes,
question on
Gary.
top of your question? why is it that we're using these standards? I understood someone to mention that they were lighting standards for signage.
Where did you read that?
I thought someone said that.
Would you show us where that is? That these are the lighting standards for
No.
signs?
I can't
I
show
don't
you.
read it.
I'm sorry, I can't refer to it because I don't have it in front of me. But I think I'm caught in throwing more water on something that is a little bit discerning, you know? Referring to a fair play overlay and then using that as a way of using standards for the rest of the county.
All right,
Mike, that lighting thing you're talking about for signs, I think would be something about the flashing light and things like that that are required about signs. I don't think there's
Okay.
a specific
Well, I'm
light
gonna-
other than
I'm
you have
gonna-
to shine on the.
Recant what I just said because I think I was off base and I'm sorry that I made it more confusing than it was helpful.
Vivian, would you like to comment about any of this?
I mean, we have a sign ordinance on its own. We have a sign for signs. Some signs are lit up. So it's kinda, there is,
I'm talking about,
I have the, this is the Appendix A here, sign, lighting standards here.
Section 38, Appendix Alpha.
yeah. Well, let's try to move this thing
I
along.
mean, it does say, the location, type, and height of luminaries, including both building ground-mounted fixtures. So when you say scale site plan for it, is this,
Well, let's hit the broader subject here.
okay.
Do you think that we should include this Appendix A, or should we take all of that yellow out and just put a period at the end of flashing lights are prohibited, period? Would appreciate some feedback. Gary?
I would agree with that suggestion.
Alex?
Yeah, that's what I thought was probably the best route last time. I think we're trying to do too much here. I think the goal is really to not blind
Or shine on the neighbor?
property next door.
But you, David?
I think we should strike the last sentence in the lighting paragraph, reference to chapter 38.
How about you, Pat?
Yes, sir.
Frankie?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor of taking out "a light plan shall be required by the planning director or their designated representative," referencing chapter 38, appendix A, et cetera. All those just raise a hand. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and remove that. Boy, that was quick. All right, let's get that accepted then. I want to pass a motion then. Can you scroll down, please, a little bit? Okay, I'd like to move that the lighting section 2 of the revision A, or B, the lighting section be accepted.
Second.
Although, any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising a hand. Is that 1, 2, 3, is that 6 of us? You up there too, Frankie? Okay, 6 of us pass that. All right, screening and buffering. I have the other part of Debbie Sewell's letter here about screening and buffering. Both screening and buffering standards in this ordinance address the critical spaces between new development and neighboring agriculture, forest, and residential properties. Screening and buffers have profound benefits to both the existing property and the new developments. They improve the environmental health, aesthetics, and enjoyment of both. Typically, higher property values are realized on both unique properties. Screening requirements are sufficiently described in the existing document. Buffers are the spaces between neighboring properties. When compared to other counties in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, buffering requirements outlined in this document are minimal. The Agriculture Advisory Board supports the original buffering requirements as a minimum. We will not support requirements that are less than what is outlined in the original document. However, we would encourage and support larger buffers between properties. For your consideration, Debbie Sewell, she's the chairperson of that committee. So, let's take this and the introduction there. The first paragraph, screening and physical separation, etc. What was added in there at the last time in green is an improved area. Does anybody have any comments on just that first paragraph?
Sir?
Yes.
I would like to ask Mr. Markovich, since he has been allowed to comment as we go, I would like to ask him to talk about Section 38 buffering, if there's any information in there that we can use to see if there are conflicts with what we have here.
Go ahead, Tom, come on.
Specifics.
There's actually buffering requirements that come under the general zoning definitions, which the one that you saw up there a few minutes ago, there's another one that's right below that. It is another definition for buffering. And it actually is a definition that goes as far as say it's natural. You don't maintain it. So it's just directly opposite of what this definition says. Now, there's also the buffering requirements that are in Appendix A. And it's very extensive, it goes way beyond anything that is.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask to address the commenter?
Sure, go ahead.
So the buffering requirements, the general ones, those are for the entire county, whereas the Appendix Alpha ones are only for the I-85 overlay, is that correct?
As I understand it right now, there have been attempts to take Appendix A and apply it to other areas of the county. And I would suspect at the last time, it may be that it's just the I-85 overlay. I'm not 100% sure on that, because there were some properties up around the lake that they were trying to get Appendix A to have to apply to. So, and I don't know what the status of that ended up. And so I
Does the
can't.
staff have any comments on that?
I'm trying to find the definitions again, I have so much stuff open now. So not at this time.
Yeah, I mean, the
Not trying to
Appendix
put
A
you on
has
the
been
spot.
around for a long time and has involved a lot of different properties. There was a whole issue of commercial properties that were within a certain, if they came within the lake zone, they were talking, and I don't know what the status of that ended up. So there was, at one time, they were addressing this whole issue of Appendix A applying to more than just the I-85 corridor. But anyway, what happens is this. It becomes very difficult to separate all these things. That's why you're having difficulty in discussing this right now. That's why staff is having difficulty in finding all the,
Okay.
right, because it's very, very, very extensive, and there's different meanings to different things. Go ahead, Vivian.
So the difference between the buffer and the buffer, one is the natural vegetative buffer, which is the 25 feet from mean sea level. That's what that is referring to, this one here. That's referring to the vegetative buffer in the overlay.
Okay.
Yeah, the lake overlay.
The lake
Oh
overlay.
my gosh, the lake overlay. So this buffer is just the buffer definition. So
Okay.
the difference is, one is a buffer definition, the other one is the buffer for the natural vegetative buffer.
Yeah, okay.
Let me help you out here, David. I remember talking to David Root about this, and he indicated that this was kind of flexible, that like Appendix A, he seemed to indicate that it could go outside of that area of the I-85 overlay. I think this is another question that we can pose to him on the 15th. So,
Right now, I don't use the Appendix A unless it's in
that overlay,
the yes.
yeah,
Yes, the I-85 overlay is the only time I refer to it.
okay. Well,
I
Yeah.
want to sort of change the subject. I just want to point out a typing clerical error in this, that right under the screening requirements where it says unless otherwise required, those items should be numbered appropriately instead of 1, 2, 4. Should be 1, 2, 3, 4.
No.
I had to read it 3 times, but something's missing.
Duly noted.
okay, let's scroll back up, please.
Excuse
Can
me.
you scroll back up for us,
Change my
Vivian,
numbering.
please?
There we go. Is that better?
There you go. All right, that first paragraph there, screening and a physical separation, et cetera, et cetera. Has anybody got any additions or corrections for that? We all comfortable with that, with what you're seeing there? All right, let's go down to Section A, screening requirements. Now, what was added there was, when we read through this thing the first time, we never had any kind of sentence or direction as to when the screening should be in place. So at the bottom of that paragraph, you'll see in the center of it, required screening should be in place within 180 days when a certificate of completion or certificate of occupancy, if required, is issued. For other business activities, the screening shall be by mutual agreement with the planning director or their designated representatives. That was added.
I just want to make
Yes.
a comment. I think it's very necessary to put a time limit on this. And this is a great improvement from the original.
Well, that's good to hear that. You don't hear that very often. All right. Is everybody comfortable with this? 180 days, 6 months. If you're in the middle of summer, you sure don't want to plant, but you'll be in the fall season, in the winter season, when you can put plants in. All right. Let's move down to paragraph, or rather, number 1. A minimum 6-foot tall wall, fence, berm, etc. And you can put in 4-foot plants capable of forming a continuous opaque screen at least 6 feet in height within 1 year of planting. So it gives you a year, somehow or another, to grow 2 feet, if you put them in that small. But that's a normal size, 4 feet, I think, is one that you can get for a reasonable cost. Everybody all right with that?
You got 2 questions there.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Frankie was
Gary.
for me. Go ahead, Frankie.
Frankie, go ahead.
What's the width on this screening? We've got the height, we don't have the width.
Well, it
Already got
has,
a 25-foot, or up to 2 acres, got a 25-foot buffer there that you can put whatever you want to in, but you have no width on this screening that is supposed to block out, hopefully, sound, vision, and the lighting that Business X is producing, but you don't have a width. I mean, I put up a 8-foot chain link fence, ain't blocking no light, it's not blocking anything. Excuse me.
I think down in here, it says that you have to, there's something about 25% opaqueness. Oh, okay, go back up to A. Not more than 25% of the vertical surface shall be open to allow passage of air, or any such opening shall be designated to obscure visibility. Does that help answer your
I think it's
question?
covered there.
The do we need to put in there? I mean, when people they see fence, they think chain link fence. They don't think, I mean, that's the only type of, they don't think of something that's gonna be
That word
technically
opaque,
solid.
pardon me,
Oh, go ahead.
pardon me, Frankie, that word opaque is supposed to take care of that.
It says it there, but it doesn't say it down here. I mean,
Yeah, I know, but this is a subsection of A.
I just feel that that's gonna be
I was gonna make the comment that I don't think, even if it's in this, I don't think it'll ever be enforced. So if somebody, doesn't have 6 feet within a year, that's not gonna be an issue. I don't think it's gonna be something that, is brought up at all. I don't think there's a problem with leaving it in, but I don't think it's ever gonna be a problem.
I'm not being the devil's advocate, the mean person on the planning commission, but why have an ordinance if we're not gonna enforce it? If the ordinance says a year and it's not there, then there should be some kind of consequence. I mean, why go through all this trouble and write an ordinance if we're not gonna, we have enough laws in this county and every other county that are not, observed. I mean, why are we spending time on this? This has been, 3 months, 2 months anyway, that we've been working on this thing. And if we're not gonna enforce every bit of it, then why have it at all?
So it could be enforced. We're complaint driven. If it's not to the standards and the neighbor wants to file a complaint, they can file a complaint and we will follow up and say, hey, you need to fix it.
But there's no punishment, I guess you'd say. I know that's not the word I want to use, but there's nothing in here that says if you don't follow these rules and we get a complaint, you're gonna be fined X number of dollars. Like a lot of some of the other ordinances we have that say you're gonna be fined X amount. This one has nothing, so why are we even fooling with it?
Go ahead, Gary.
I would like to say that I don't think we should have fines, for people who have documentation as to what the rules are. And they'll just be asked to abide by the rules. I don't think we need fines.
And if they don't abide by the rules,
Vivian, we have a code enforcement officer. This would be directed to him, would it not? If somebody wrote in a complaint and
It
said
would
that,
come out in the planning department, the planning director or his designee, because it's
Yeah.
zoning, basically.
all right. And if that continues, just like we have junkyard problems, it ends up going to the magistrate. Is that not correct, Vivian?
That is correct.
And the magistrate can either impose a fine or say you have a certain number of days to correct it and then impose a fine. It's a very lengthy process. I think we would really be overstepping things if we started to put in some kind of a consequence if things are not done in 1 year. I mean, we've already got the code enforcement officer, so if somebody wrote in a complaint, he would address it.
excuse me, Mike, I'm not saying that we should, I'm just saying there's nothing there, and the magistrate can only go by the laws or the rules, and if there's no rule, he can't fine anybody. He can't make them do it because there's no rule that says they have to, it's just there, and he can't say, if you don't do it, we're gonna fine you $25 a day. He can't do that because there's nothing in this ordinance that says he has the authority to do that.
You are correct. And that's why we're fixing the RV ordinance. This may be something, this is the sign ordinance one, that's at the bottom of the sign ordinance, that I just picked out. And that's standard, I think, for the ordinances that we have.
Are you saying you want to put this kind of a sentence in this ordinance? Is that what you're saying, Frankie?
I'm saying if we're gonna have the ordinance, there's got to be consequences for people that don't abide by the rules. No law, no judge, no magistrate can do anything if nobody abides by any of this because there's no penalties for such action of just, I'm not gonna do it. Our codes guy can't say, well, you're gonna have to do it. That's all he can say. He can't make them do it, he can't fine them because there's nothing in this ordinance that says he can. I'm not saying we need it. I don't think we need the ordinance, but we've already got one. I don't think we need another one, but I'm just saying, if we're gonna have something, there's got to be consequences for not following. It's just like if your mother tells you not to get up in that chair and you get up in that chair, back in my day, you got your butt spanked for getting in that chair. This has no teeth in it to make to get people to actually do what we're asking them to do.
How many people here think we ought to have something in here written for enforcement, a fine or something like that, or anything like that? Pat?
Is that just pretty much across the board, any of the zoning stuff? I seen one for the billboards, you probably have to pay the penalty, but,
And that's under the sign ordinance as well.
so is that pretty much,
I'm going through them.
I think it, Mr. Chairman, is just assumed that, the code enforcement guy enforces code, then it's turned over to a magistrate. It seems like that's the logical route.
Yeah, that's what I figured too, but then the magistrate don't have any power to do anything because there's nothing in this ordinance that says he can.
Yeah. That's some legalese there, Frankie, I don't know.
I know.
All right, I tell you what, let me suggest this. Let's keep this open and let's talk about it on the 15th. Let's do that. Alex, what do you think about that? Because we'll have David Root here. Vivian, will you make a note of that, please, in all of your notes that we want to ask that to David? Please.
Yes, sir.
What do you think? David, down the end, what do you think?
I think we need to scrap this one and rewrite section 38 to be what we want it to be, if we want it to be different, and have this provisions in section 38. That's what I think, but I'm just one person. And I know we've already got a version of this that's gone to council. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So they already are going to vote on that version alpha. We're just trying to give them something a little more palatable, which
An alternative,
I think
if you will.
neither are palatable in my opinion, but
All right. Is everybody all right with that we wait till the 15th and ask David that? Is everybody okay with that? Everybody? All right? Okay, let's move on then. Let's see, can I assume that screening requirements, A, we're comfortable with what we've added in there? And move down to number 1? A minimum of a 6-foot tall wall, et cetera, et cetera. That hasn't changed any. We took out evergreen vegetation. Number 2, existing vegetation may be utilized provides the screening required as determined by the planning director or the designee. Mike Johnson talked to me about that on the telephone today. And previously, it had, on the left screen, you'll see it had existing evergreen vegetation. And he used the example, let's say I have 10 acres of property and I put my activity more or less in the center of it. I've got a lot of trees and plants and whatever that'll provide a screen. So I think that's a good change to take out that word evergreen. Number 3, the new number 3. Fences or walls and straw, the finished side towards the adjacent or neighboring properties, that's pretty standard. Are we okay down to there? Buffer requirements. There's your buffer requirements of 5, 15, and 25 feet,
I've got a question on that one.
okay?
So looking at section 38, you've got setback requirements for structures, and those setback requirements are less than these buffer widths. For example, a 1 acre lot on non-residential uses. Front setbacks 25 feet, side setbacks 5 feet, rear setbacks 10 feet. But yet, on a 1 acre lot, we have a 15-foot buffer.
all the way around.
So that's a conflict.
But is the difference because we're talking about new?
No, this is new too. Both
Well,
would be,
New construction, new development.
both would be commercial development. You put your building in. Okay, in section 38, it says you have, like I say, a 25-foot front setback, a 5-foot side setback, and a 10-foot rear setback. So you're in the buffer, according to this rule that we're proposing. Can that be possible? Is that a conflict?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
What section 38 are you referring to?
Section 38-10.9, Community Commercial District. Now, that just be a particular district, I don't know.
Those are setbacks, not buffers.
Correct.
What's the difference?
Well, the setback is you can't do any construction in those setbacks without a variance. And a buffer would be whatever the definition of buffer was that we read.
You can do anything you
But
want
the
to with a buffer.
setback's 5 feet and the buffer's 15 feet, so you could, in 38, you could go all the way to the setback, but the buffer's gonna cut 10 feet more out of that
Correct.
you can't go into. So now they've got this rule that messes this rule up.
Plus you got screening in front of that buffer or behind it, one of the two, depending on what you got. So it could be, instead of 15 foot, it could be 20 foot, the whole area, 20 foot taken off the property.
I'm just saying, I don't feel like this has been well-researched, as Mr. Markovich said, in its comparison to Section 38. There's still gonna be conflicts if we don't get Mr. Root to go back and compare these and make sure they align with each other. Really, it would help if if you modified Section 38 and put this stuff in that, then you would know what the conflicts are and you could resolve them. You wouldn't be creating something over here that conflicts with something over here. And that's a good example of what Mr. Markovich is talking about.
I don't disagree with what you're saying about the conflict. I'm going back to the agriculture community. They're the ones that are generally impacted by this. And I've gone to their meetings and they want the protection when residential or commercial or some kind of activity comes in next to them.
Do they not already have that with the Right to Farm Act?
Right to Farm Act, that's true to a certain extent. And of course, if you're moving in next to an agriculture community, you need to know that and be aware of that. But they're asking for these minimum setbacks or buffer areas for additional protection. I'm inclined to stay with this until we can get to that public hearing.
I thought the public hearing was,
Next meeting.
we provide them with something that's polished and ready to go, and then they try to address it. But we don't have anything polished at all, in my opinion.
What would you suggest? What would you suggest?
I think it needs to go back to the staff and Mr. Root, and we need to figure out how to revise it in Section 38. That's my suggestion.
Well, this isn't Section 38, isn't it?
No, this is 32.
I mean, this is in 38.
Yeah, anyway, why don't we,
Sorry, Section 32.
why
Well,
couldn't we go back to
32
10,
is
make them all 10 foot?
38.
I'm just going with what the Agriculture Advisory Group had said, that this is the minimum that they'll support.
I'd like to say that I can agree with moving forward with the way it is now. And to me, Adam, before he left, Adam Chapman said, one thing we need to do was listen to agriculture. And I heard that loud and clear. And to me, if this is what they recommend, there's probably some good reasons for it. So I would be willing to vote to move forward with it as is now.
Alex?
I'm not opposed to it. I think it makes sense to me.
Pat, you're the agriculture guy.
Yes, well, my comment was gonna be, yeah, as a minimum, I would support this because being an ag guy, I have been subject to development being too close to me and, or us. And we're always come out on the short end of the stick, regardless of the Right to Farm Act or whatever, so it wouldn't hurt my feelings if it was 100 feet, but as a minimum 5 feet, I certainly support my constituents who have spent a lot of time researching this and, voted amongst their board to support it, and I support their recommendation.
Okay, let's press it on.
32.
How many people are in favor of leaving the 5, 15, and 25 the way it is for the November 15 hearing? How many people? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, opposed? 2. Okay, so it stays the way it is until the November 15th hearing. Let's scroll down. Uses permitted in the buffer? I was a guy that came up with paved sidewalks. Sidewalks was in there before. The county has the definition of sidewalk. I'm willing to take out the word paved and just leave in there sidewalks.
Well, why are we gonna have a buffer supposed to protect each the property and have driveways, storm drains, parking lot stubs? I can see the signs. I mean, this is supposed to be a protection between two different uses, and you put a road right there, that's only 3 feet from the property line, and it's no longer a buffer anymore. It's just a driveway.
Well, it is between adjacent properties. In other words, they've agreed to it.
Right.
So if you and I want to set up a buffer, but we want to also have a driveway in between our two properties, then fine.
Alex? Mike?
Go ahead.
Alex?
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. I'm sorry.
I did have a question about that. Do we need to include, screening and fencing can be put inside the buffer? Or is the expectation there's a buffer and then fencing? I think in my mind I had it to where there could be, the screening could actually fall into the buffer. But I'm not sure if that was correct or not.
I mean, it has vegetation and landscaping, but it doesn't have anything specifically says screening. So the way it stands now, you'd have to do your screening, then have your buffer.
Okay.
Well, your screening could be part of your buffer if you wanted to do that.
But it doesn't say that.
Yeah, that's what I'm questioning, if that needs to be
Added in there?
use permitted in the buffer, for example, fencing or, what the intent would be there.
Can you scroll down on the right just a little bit, Vivian?
Well, I'm looking at the one on the left so you can
Oh.
read that one. I mean, it's the entire length of the shared property line. So now, it's just for argument purposes, I mean, fences can go up to the property line. So I think,
They have to be so far off the property line, don't they?
nope, can go up to property, up to
No.
the
So in other
property
words,
line.
I can build a fence right down on the property line?
You can, but we ask that you don't because you have to maintain it, and you can't go on somebody else's property to maintain it.
I see
Mr.
'em
Chair,
also.
I got a
Yeah,
question.
Gary?
And Vivian, it's for you. I was wondering if you could, there seems to be some lack of clarity between buffer and screening. And I was just wondering, if you could shed some light on how the two work in order to create the environment that we're asking for.
I actually don't deal with screening. Screening isn't,
Well, just tell us what you know about buffering then.
I know the vegetative buffer, you can't do anything in, just leave it alone.
I was thinking, and, I've talked with other members of the council on this, is that there seems to be a misunderstanding of what a buffer is,
Correct,
okay?
as
And
Mr. Markovich said, yes, correct.
so, I know we've got a definition, I'm fine with the definition that we've got now. But how the buffer and the screen are to work together to provide for the type of environment that we're asking for.
Do you have Adam's fancy little drawing that he did that had
Ooh,
did he put a fence in it or did he just put the buffer?
I think it was just the buffer, I don't think he had a
Okay.
fence on it.
See, in my mind, I imagine the two were somewhat one and the same.
But yeah, that's,
That's why I would think it would need
see,
to
for
be.
me, the screening is the fence, the buffer is the vegetation. You have the fence, you have your vegetation, you have your building, and then you have your residence.
So would it help to clarify if you said that under uses permitted in the buffer, under section C, if you said provided these things do not violate the screening requirements in section A? I mean, that's really what it's about, right? You can put these things in as long as you don't violate the screening requirements.
What do you think, Alex? You had a question about it?
Or is that implied?
Gary, do you think we need to add something in there to clarify that a little bit?
I don't know. I really don't. I was thinking, just my gut reaction is that we don't need it. But I wish that we all had in our minds the difference between buffer and screening. And I can remember when we were talking about this, that we've all had a little bit of trouble getting in our minds. And my understanding is the buffering is an amount of space, linear space on land. Screening, of course, is something that, as they say, opaque, so that you can't see through it. All right, it's only going to be 6 feet high. So you've got, depending on how much land you've got, half an acre, up 2 acres, more, you've got to provide a buffer. Now, what can't go in that buffer? Well, there's a lot of stuff that can't go in it, but what we're saying is this is the stuff that can go in it. And that's the best I can do to try to clarify it in my mind and hopefully in some other people's minds. But one thing is for sure, I want people to understand, buffer is not screen. There's no such thing as a buffer that you can't see through. I mean, that's my understanding of it because it's land. I mean, there could be a screen on the buffer, but I'm just saying, buffering is an amount of land, like someone else brought up before. It could be 5 feet on the sides and 10 feet in the back, but it's an amount of land. And so buffering is not screening.
They can get a little bit confusing. You can have very dense plants put in a buffer that will provide the screening required. So those plants they can be designated as a buffer, but they can also provide the screening required. Or you can put up some kind of physical screening. I don't care if it's a chain link fence with the material that goes over it, the black material, gray or green or whatever material you have that gives you that opaque, and then you have the buffer behind it. So it could be a combination of the two. But So if I plant holly trees in there close together, it'll provide me with the screening and it'll also take care of the buffer area too.
Well, when you say take care of the buffer area, that's another thing that doesn't sound right to me, because it's not like taking care of it something, it's like that it exists. It's just a linear piece of, property, or designated piece of property. It's just land.
Well, what do you suggest?
I suggest just leave it the way it is.
Oh, okay,
That's what I said before.
all right.
So, sir, I highlighted, the purpose of screening is to provide a visual screen between dissimilar uses. That's right under screening requirements. And if you go down here under buffer requirements, a buffer is a physical separation by distance between the new development and adjacent property line.
So if I were building a development, and I were gonna put up a fence, could I put the fence inside the buffer? I think that's my question is, and I think if that's the case, we probably need to include that screening elements, may be,
Maybe part of the
maybe
buffer?
put in the buffer, if that's the case.
Well, let's come up with some verbiage there. If, can you come up with some quick verbiage?
I mean, that's what I would add right there, is uses permitted in the buffer, screening elements, whether that's the fence or the evergreen landscape.
What do you think? What does anybody else think about that? David?
Excuse me.
I don't know why you wouldn't do the screening within the buffer.
That's what
Well,
I'm
that's,
thinking.
yeah,
I think the idea is if you have a buffer and you're gonna build a fence or you're gonna put up evergreens, do you have to put them on the
Line.
after the buffer, and you have all of this property that you have to maintain between your fence and the neighbor's property? Or are you able to put your screen here where you have less property to maintain between the development and the neighbor's property? Or easier property to maintain?
anybody have any other? Do you have any comments, Vivian?
No.
No.
I got one. Keep adding to the confusion we got. I got a question. On, buffer requirements B, the last sentence says, this is not in addition to any underlying zoning district setbacks. So what does that throw in the mix? I mean, is this saying that 32 is gonna be superior, supersedes this amendment, or?
No, and I think that means your setback can be part of your buffer. You
Let's-
can put your fence up to that property line, you can put your buffer up to that property line.
All right. I want to deal with what we had before we get into.
Can't put fence on property.
Should we add screening elements into, can you scroll up, please? Into this uses permitted in the buffer?
We would have to, or you can't do it according to the way it's written now, so we'd need to put that in there.
Okay, all right.
I mean, that's just,
Is that sufficient, the wording screening elements? So we add another dot? How many people want to
How about
add that
screening
in?
requirements?
You want to make it screening requirements?
Well, I was suggesting it to see if it's a good
You
idea.
know,
Screening methods,
all right, let's go. Anybody else got another word?
I'd say methods, screening methods.
That sounds fine with me.
All right, let's go with screening methods. How many people want to add screening methods under uses permitted in the buffer area? Just raise a hand. 1, 2, 3, that's unanimous. Holy cow, 6 people. So would you add that bullet point in there?
Already, right there.
Okay, let's deal with paved sidewalks. I suggest we take out the word paved. Has anybody got a heartburn about that? Everybody that agrees with that, just raise a hand. Okay, who suggested that anyway? All right, that's eliminated. Okay, let's deal with section 3, let's vote on that. I move that we accept that section, what is that, section 3, screening and buffering, with the agreed on revisions.
Second.
Any comments about it? All those in favor, raise one hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? 2. All right, motion passes. Let's go down to the bottom section. Yeah, save that, Vivian. Exemptions. Has anybody got anything to add or subtract from exemptions?
I'm not sure I understand everything that's in B. The screening and buffering requirements are not required in the following circumstances. The first two are the ones that are giving me some trouble. I'm not sure exactly what it's asking there. You know, that this be exempt, that the property lines within adjacent to public or private right-of-ways / easements. So, I mean, there's a lot of, in my opinion, I might be wrong, but there's a lot of public and private right-of-ways around. And some of them are very limited amount of space. So, I mean, if you have someone come in and, you know, we're thinking, hey, when you come in, you need to put up this screen and buffering, and you gotta meet these lighting requirements. But wait a second, you don't need to do the screening and buffering if you have a private right-of-way or an easement here. I mean, and it doesn't say exactly what type of easement or what type of, but who's to say I don't just make a private right-of-way? You see what I'm saying? There's questions in my mind I can't answer. I'm throwing it out to the group. Maybe someone can explain it to me.
Well, first of all, legally, you can't make a private right-of-way or easement without legally obtaining it. And to answer that part of your question,
Okay.
and
Does
I think an
anybody else
easement-
see any problem with that as far as not, this is an exemption. So if there's an easement, then you don't have to do all these other requirements. I mean, not all of them, just the
Screening and buffering.
screening and buffering. Thank you, Mr. Nix.
Let's say the power company, I think that's a good, they have a lot of easements. And the sewer line, they have a lot of easements. So if you have that touching the property that you may have to put a buffer on, you wouldn't have to. Or additional setback.
Yeah, is everybody okay with that?
Well, some of these easements are pretty darn wide, I mean, you
Yeah.
know.
I'm asking these questions, I'm being vulnerable because I don't know all these things, like Mr. Williams mentioned about, private easement.
Go ahead, Frankie.
What about the easement I have on my property that's only, I think it's 12 feet? It just gives me an easement to go back to my property. I don't own the land, I just got an easement, other people own it, so if somebody bought, which I do own both of them now, but at that time I didn't, so if somebody bought that other land, they can't do anything with my easement, and it's whatever a driveway is, 12 feet? So, no, mine's not 20, this is an old driveway, enough for a wagon and a horse. So, if they buy that, it's in a residential area, they put a Dollar General there, they don't have to do a buffer on that side, because there's an easement there. And it's only, I'm thinking it's only about 10, it may be 12, I don't know.
I mean, it's an easement, it's, you know, for you to drive on, is what I'm
Yeah, it's an easement, it's just the same type, it's an easement, just the same as Blue Ridge has an easement, 20-foot easement to run power lines. I mean,
You would
this
want-
doesn't specify.
You would want a buffer there?
No, I'm saying, this says they don't have to put one there, but what about the neighbor that owns the other property where that, because in my case, let's say that driveway is that far from the property line, from their property. And it goes right down the side of their property into the back part. And so if somebody bought that 3/4 of an acre that's there, and put up a Dollar General, according to this, they wouldn't have to do a buffer or screening on that side of the property, but yet there's a house right there.
I would think existing zoning laws, if it was a commercial piece of property, they would have to adhere to their side of the property line up for the setbacks and easement.
They've only got the property line, they only have
Again, that's section 32.
roughly, because the property line's here, and then it's down, and then the driveway starts. There's like the bank is maybe as high as that table there, but yet, it's an actual easement, it's on the deeds and everything else, that it's an easement that property has to give access to the back, the quarter or whatever it is on the back side. So if a commercial entity bought that property with that easement on it, they wouldn't have to put up a buffer or screen any one on that side of the property because there's an easement there, according to what we have written there. Now, that may be a one property out of every property in the county, but I'm very doubtful that it is. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more easements with that same thing.
Well, let me just ask a real big question. Why is it that we're putting these exemptions in here? I know for A, I'm comfortable with that, but I'm not necessarily comfortable with all these ones listed in B. I just wondered, why do we have to have those in there? I'm sure there's a good reason, I
I
just
think
think,
the answer is, if somebody builds on Highway 11, they don't want to have to put screening on the front of their property for somebody on the other side of Highway 11, or any highway for that matter, or any large street.
And the other,
Or any power line easement. It's really not, it's the owner, the developer having to go to an expense that they really don't need to do.
and the other one is, let me add in there, Hartwell Village is a good example. They have different activities within that large development there. And this gives them a way of avoiding having to go into buffering and screening, et cetera. All right, let me ask you this. Do you want to take out the words "or private rights-of-way / easements"? Do you want to eliminate that and just leave in their property lines within adjacent to public rights-of-way? Just take out the word private or private.
I'd feel more comfortable about that.
David? No? Yes, Vivian?
You're still talking about private roads. We have a lot of private roads in this, in this county. So you're talking about putting those buffers in the private roads as well? I mean, taking that out just opens up a whole lot.
Okay. Opens up more problems than it solves.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I think the feeling is to leave it in there. Is that,
Well, I just want to say this, I'm glad we had the discussion, okay? Because I feel better about having discussed this. Because I didn't have much clarity on it, and I feel better about it now. Thank you.
all right, we all right with the first bullet point, second bullet point? And the third one is kind of like, look at Hartwell Village. And the fourth bullet point. Well, I'd like to make a motion then that we accept Section 4 exemption as
Second.
written. Is there a second to that?
Second.
We've got a second from Pat. Any discussion? All those in favor, just raise of one hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are you there, Frankie? No. Okay, opposed? 5 to 1. Motion passes. Okay, so we have a plan to take to the public hearing on November the 15th, and we have several questions for David Root. Should we review those questions now and be sure that we have them?
Probably.
Okay, do you want to, did you write them down, or
I wrote
should
down
we?
penalties,
All right,
any penalties.
what else did we have? Will you scroll back up to the top, and let's see if we get them all down for,
What had to, what are the development standards, and if we already have one in 32, why do we need one in 38?
all right, the conflict between 32 and 38,
Yeah.
Right.
and if we scroll down a little more, we have Appendix A, do we not? Does it only apply to the I-85 overlay?
And we took that section out.
We took that
I
out.
know we took it out, but that question's gonna come up anyway. Let's ask him to address that anyway.
Okay. I mean, I only use it in anything
Well-
in the Carolina Gateway.
All right. So we have 32 and 38. You don't want us, does anybody want us to address Appendix A? Ask him that question? Anybody?
Is it in the original? That's my question.
No, it's not in the original. All right, so we're taking out Appendix A, and we have, what other part? Vivian?
I think what David brought up about the zoning setbacks that we already have,
In the buffer.
the buffer and the buffer conflict.
Zoning setbacks?
Well, they're two different things,
Correct, yeah.
setbacks and buffers.
Buffering,
Two
correct,
different
it is.
things.
But
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If they're two different things, does that mean that they are adjacent? In other words, we have a 5-foot setback on property, and we have a 15-foot buffer. Do we now have a 20-foot
No.
length of
No,
property?
no,
no.
So this overrides any zoning setbacks.
This is not in addition to any underlying zoning district
No,
setbacks.
the problem is that if a planner of the project doesn't read the rules carefully, he'll say, oh, I can build my commercial structure within 5 feet of the property line. And then he comes to find out later that he needs 15 feet of buffer, and he doesn't have, so he's 10 feet encroached on the buffer zone. That makes it complicated for the developer.
Makes it complicated for the planner, too.
Not being mean, but
And the planner.
he should know all that before he starts his building. Because he should be coming to planning and saying, this is what I plan on doing, and believe me, Vivian is gonna say, listen, you gotta have a 15-foot buffer.
It doesn't make any sense to have a conflict like that, though.
It doesn't, but
All right, so I want to try to nail this down again. We're talking about the conflict between 32 and 38 in
No,
regards
no,
to this.
This is actually 38 and 38. I erroneously said 32. I think this, while I think this ought to be in 32, this is in, what we're proposing is section 38 something 6, and the conflict is in 38 as far as the setbacks. That piece is in 38. I forget what section I quoted. I can't find it now, but
All right, let's go through it again. With the questions that we want to ask Mr. Root, okay?
Okay.
We have conflicts within 38, is that what we're concerned about?
yes.
conflict between,
They're two separate questions. There's 132 versus 38.
that's right.
And then there's another question regarding
38.
buffer and setbacks within
Okay.
38.
So it's in 38 zoning, Article 9, general provisions, which is use interpretations, zoning map interpretations, dimensional requirements, general provisions and exceptions, height and other requirements, and this would be 38-9.6, which is here.
That's right.
I lost it.
It's gone.
It's gone.
38,
So it's
9,
being-
5.
think it
it's
belongs
going
there.
under general provisions, under chapter 38, if that helps clarify it all.
Okay, what else do we have for David?
Well, if you want to add penalties,
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, so we have 3 things to talk to David about. Is that right? Got them?
the conflict, the penalties, what was the other one?
I don't know if there was another one. Was there another one?
There was a conflict between 32 and 38. The development standards is in both, will be in both,
Sections.
ordinance sections, what do you want to call it? And then the buffers and setback thing here, plus the
Penalties.
penalties.
Is everybody all right with that? Yes, Gary?
I was looking at my notes here, and I wrote down under this area that David offered for us under the, where he talks about buffer and screening requirements. I had become part of their permit, and I think that was the question I was asking Vivian, of whether or not this would, people, if they read this, would they have an understanding of that would become part of their permit? Which I hope you can remember what it was that I was asking. You said we should ask David about that. I thought that's what you said. I might be wrong.
No, you did, I did say that.
Okay, so in answering Chairman Smith's question, there might be another question for David Root.
The permitting. Yes, let me work on that, yes, there may be another question for David. Mr.
All right, so we have 4 questions.
Possibly 4.
So, no, 3. What was the,
With this new one, he was brought about being.
yeah, I wrote that one down,
All right,
sorry,
we got everything in?
yeah.
Okay, so the next meeting will be a public hearing on November the 15th. And we'll do it the same way we did the practice public hearing. I call it a practice public hearing. We'll have 2 phases to it. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up as related to the development standards at this point? Anybody else? Anything? Well, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those do we need to discuss, or can we just say we're all in favor of adjourning?
I don't even know if we have to vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Pat, thank you for being sure that Vivian got out to her car last meeting.
You're welcome.
Yes, Pat,
So-
thank you very much.
I even wait till the preacher leaves when I leave church, just to
Oh,
make
do
sure.
you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna be sure she gets to her car tonight. All right?